How are you,
my
man?
I'm
So
good.
good to see you.
It takes a pandemic to get a call from Brian Hollins, huh?
Oh, it's so good to see you, man.
Dude, man, I like that brick wall. You live in that East Coast life.
We're trying. For people joining, Arteen Arabshahi, Vice President at WndrCo. Before WndrCo, helped launch a firm called Fika Ventures. Prior to investing, also helped launch Built in LA, worked at Techstar Chicago, has sit on a couple different regional boards. So, the nation's largest small business lender called the Opportunity Fund, and is also on the board of his alma mater at University of Arizona. Frequent contributor, as I know, to Forbes and TechCrunch and Business Insider and a variety of other platforms. And my favorite little know-how, he's a moonlight slam poet. So for those that are interested in learning a little more about that, we probably won't have time to get into it here, but really appreciate you jumping on, man. Would love to start off with, what have the last few days looked like? What do you think the next few weeks will look like? Would love to just get your perspective on COVID-19 so far.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. It is like, this is a great example of what the last few days have looked like. It's amazing. Humans are incredibly resilient and incredibly adaptive, and so the fact that, within a few days things like this are already popping up, and I have a friend who's doing for her birthday, just come over her Zoom for her birthday party instead, and her boyfriend is a DJ who's going to do a live set, and it's going to be hundreds of people just zoomed in. So these things are examples of how this new normal right now is shaping out. So for me, it's I'm at home. I've been home a lot. I'm in the camp of really aggressively trying to not leave. I kind of maybe I've gone on a walk, and I take a couple calls here and there, outside. But I'm in an apartment building, and so social distance is tough to have if you're not in your actual space. And so, but the last week or two, it's just been wild. So today is today's March 19th, and I've been working from home pretty aggressively for about 10 days. I'm in LA, just for context. And so, we went on official shutdown, shutdown's not the right term. We went on kind of restaurants are doing takeout only and things like that. I think I want to say it was on Monday, maybe it was Sunday, so 3-4 days ago. But I actually so there's two things that have been interesting for me. One is my older brother lives in New York, and he actually spent January working in Italy, preparing on a cruise ship. Actually, he's an actor, and his show was preparing to launch something on this cruise ship. So long story short, my brother has been talking to me about this thing since the beginning of the year, and so I've been pretty privy to everything going on for quite some time. And then the second thing that's been really interesting is that I actually had a cold about 2 weeks ago, a little more than 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't symptomatic of coronavirus, but I still was kind of just mindful of everything going on. And so I stayed home, and I had a fever for just 1 day, but I stayed home for 5 days. So long story short, I think everyone has been kind of work from home for about a week. And I'm kind of in this weird 2.5 weeks now, because I was actually sick. There was 1 or 2 days where it was normal. And then it was yo, we're all staying home. This is the move. Stay home if you can stay home. And so I would be lying if I didn't say I was, stir crazy. I'm very much an extrovert. I love people. That's why I like the business that I'm in. But yeah, the day to day is just stay home as much as you can. If you're privileged.
Let's talk a little bit about you're a big mental health advocate. I know you've done a lot of that stuff in the past. What do you think is going to be the transgression of people over, frankly, a lot of people are not 2 weeks in. Some people are a day or two in. And so as people get used to it, and maybe this is a month, 2 months, however out you want to go, what are some of the best practices or things that you think will be important for people to get used to? Yeah,
no, it's a great question, man. And yeah, we'll talk we'll talk for now kind of within the ecosystem of people who are able to, you know, work from home, right? Like we're obviously talking about this in our realm, in a position of immense kind of privilege, being able to just sit home. You know, I saw a meme that I loved going around, which was something like your grandparents were asked to go to war, and you're being asked to sit on your couch, like do it. And I totally feel that. But so on the mental health side, like, I've struggled with depression in the past. I think everyone's kind of on a spectrum of mental health. I think that I feel personally fortunate that I'm somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, where I've had some of my own issues, but nothing that's kind of been debilitating, or needed to be kind of clinically treated in a meaningful way. And so I talk a lot about it just because I think that people think of mental health and they think it's like the terrible thing that you should never talk about, and it's like taboo and all that stuff. And I'm like, yo, mental health is a spectrum. Like, you have mental health, I have mental health, we all have it. So I think that this mode is just, people are gonna go through phases, right? And I think like the first few days is kind of just like this is kind of cool, it's crazy, like I kind of just like stay home now. And like and that there's a lot of people like, oh, I'm watching, what shows should I watch and something. And like I think that's all real and great in the beginning, but then I think you kind of get to this state of like, you go stir crazy. Like humans are social, and we need social interaction, and as much as the video based stuff helps, it's still not the same, right? You forget, like, hey, getting a hug is really nice. Like, when was the last time you guys got a hug, right? Like, we're not like 6 feet, even from your, like, no hugging, right? And so I think that after a few days, those things start to take place, and you go a little stir crazy. And so for me, I've found that putting in routine has been really valuable. I found that it's okay to shift what your routine used to be in this new world. So for me, I grew up as a night owl. Like college, I was always up really late and I would sleep in a little bit. And then in my working environment, I'd shifted that, where I would try to go to bed, at like 11 or 12, and I'd be up at like 7, try to start my day at 8:30 and 9 or whatever. And what's happened for me over the last few weeks is it's slowly shifting, where like I'm going to bed at like 1 or 2, and I'm waking up at like 8 or 8:30. And like, it's because I can, right? Like there's no construct right now. And so within that world though, creating your own routine, I think getting up, getting dressed, like doing the things that you need to. Honestly, like I caught myself, earlier this week, like I didn't brush my teeth until noon, because I like got up and I like, I like went, made a cup of coffee, I hopped on some calls, I started doing stuff, and then by the next thing I knew, it was noon, and I was like, I haven't showered and brushed my teeth. So I think what will happen is, there'll be naturally slip into a category of having a few days where you feel that way, and then a lot of people will kick back into like this gear of like, okay, I need to do something. And so for me, that's kind of the process I'm in right now, is okay, I want to do the at-home workouts, whether it just be push-ups and sit-ups and crunches or whatever, or it's Peloton if you got one, or for me it's just kind of like random YouTube videos. Peloton's doing 90 days free for their digital app, and I'm using that. I'm using ClassPass Live. Like I'm using all these different things just to like be a little bit active. You'll notice your step count is almost gone the moment you're at home. And then get up, shower, get dressed, brush your teeth. And then if you can, and I still feel question marks around this, so this isn't a suggestion, but I am still, once every 2 or 3 days, I try to, go outside and just go on like a little walk. It's been raining in LA, so it's been limiting, but as much as you can be socially distant, but still kind of get some sunlight, or get outside, like I think that's good for the mental health as well. So awesome. Sorry to ramble on this.
Thanks for sharing that. It's an important topic. It's an important topic. Let's shift a little bit just to the venture world. How does tech evolve? How does the world evolve? What does the landscape look like in tech after this, and what are some of the things that you're sort of excited to maybe see shift?
Yeah, there's probably 2 things that I've been thinking a lot about right now, and I'll share this as like with the caveat, as I'm sure hopefully everybody else is too, which is just like, who knows, right? Like I think it's still in this stage of like, who knows, in a lot of ways. I think that there's some rewarding, kind of promising results coming out of other parts of the world who suffered and experienced this sooner than we did, but also everyone's treating this differently, so it's really hard to know, and I wouldn't claim to be the expert here. But the two things that I've thought a lot about, first is that everyone's saying, okay, well, are people still investing, right? Are VCs still making investments? And the first thing that I would say around that is, I think what's interesting about this time is even if you ignore the economic environment altogether for just a quick imaginary hypothetical moment, we are asking, millions of people to shift their working behavior and to be working from home. I'm in a position where I don't have elderly parents to care for. I don't have children to care for right now in my life. And so with that in mind, my life is a seamless transition in a lot of ways, right? But if I'm a partner at a venture capital firm and I wasn't actively doing a deal right now or last week or 2 weeks ago, and then my kids are no longer able to go to school and my parents are elderly and maybe immunocompromised in some capacity, the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm not prioritizing, let me go source a deal. I'm prioritizing, let me manage my family and my life in the best way that I can. And I think that what we'll see in the short term is that. So I wouldn't say, regardless of the economy right now, I think the next 2-3 weeks, people are just like trying to adjust. That doesn't mean deals stop. Like I wired on 2 deals today, and I think deals are still happening. But I do think that just behavior changes, right? And I think people are willing to accept that, and people are understanding of that. People are switching calls to, hey, sorry, last minute, sorry, we got to handle a crisis, or hey, is it okay? It should totally always be okay, but like, hey, my kid is going to join us on this call, and things like that are going to start to happen, and I think that's normal. But then when you think about the macro kind of economic, conversation around this, the way I think about this is that we've been upswing in the economy, at least in the U.S., for quite a while, and with that in mind, like a lot of people have been anticipating a downturn, right? Like we've all been talking about, when does this go away, right? Like when does this, markets are cyclical and we are overdue for a part of the cycle. And I think that what's interesting is no one predicts black swan events, because that's why they're black swan events and why they're called such. But I think coronavirus and this pandemic right now is probably the black swan event that causes the market correction, right? And so that's one thought process around that. Second thought process around that is kind of just the impact on economies when you actually have to shut downs, right? Nearly 50% of the U.S. GDP comes from small businesses. Most of those small businesses are going to be the ones hit the hardest by actual physical world shutdowns, because their goods and services generally can't be delivered virtually. And so when you think about it, in the world of 50% of the U.S. economy shuts down for whether it be 2 weeks, which is what people are talking about now, or 2-3 months, or the worst case, some people say 18 months of kind of recurring kind of shutdowns and opens and shutdowns and opens. That's a macroeconomic conversation that like we've never dealt with, and so the way I'm thinking about it a lot is just like this balance of pandemic investing versus like recession investing, right? And you think about pandemic investing, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what's happening in the next month, right? And that's the distractions, all that stuff. And then you think about pandemic investing, and it means, well, okay, if this doesn't get under control and this is the new normal for 12 months or 18 months, what does investments look like over that course of time? And I think it includes kind of a bit of a normalization with like some constriction, but people get used to this new format. But then on the other side, you think about recession investing, and I think that recession investing is something that people know how to do, right? Like obviously a lot of people, if you have dry powder, if you have cash, if you're able to invest in bad times, historically that has proven to be successful. And I think most rational thinkers are aware of that. I think the big question mark for me is just, we don't know how bad of recession investing this will be, right? Because it's unprecedented, right? And so there's so many question marks. Like I talked to a lot of people who are like, hey, this is not the same feeling as 08 and 09. This is not the same feeling as 01, right? And with that in mind, I think there will be trepidation. But all this said, like I think the day-to-day things of, hey, will venture capital deals still get done? Yes, like all those things are adaptable. But the reality of it is I do think people will start to think differently about how they invest and what they're investing in. So that's my take.
Pandemic versus recession investing. It's super insightful.
TM.
I love it. I love it. Let me just ask
one other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Feel free to ask a question if you want.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing that I didn't touch on that I do think is really important and interesting is just like new business creation in this time, right? And again, I think we're too early to say, you know, once we have a better sense of what the longevity of this experience is going to be, I think we'll be able to actually pontificate a little bit more articulately about this. But in the short term, you know, just thinking out loud of like, okay, remote work, right? Virtual Zoom, like there's a reason Zoom is you know, skyrocketing right now in the market, right? But when you think about it, Silicon Valley has been a proponent of future of work, remote work pretty aggressively, you know, in the last couple of years. And a lot of people have been investing in those types of tools and things like that. But the rest of the world was not, and when I say the rest of the world, I mean the rest of the economy, right? The other industries. They weren't pushing for this as aggressively. So the way I think about this right now is education, like higher education. Yeah. Universities were not going to work remote, at least for another decade, right? Maybe 2 decades, right? Because they're just, that's not how they're set up. But now they're being forced to work remote, right? They're being forced to figure out all these things. So I think there's this whole crop of opportunities to support these things. The thing that I most think about is, okay, that's a definite short-term opportunity. Is that a long-term opportunity of like 2 years from now? What does the University of Arizona look like versus today, right? And how do they operate? And I think that my kind of personal summation of that right now is, I think in the past, if you assume, you know, maybe 10 or 20% of the economy was like work from home or remote friendly. And right now, this push with everything going on maybe pushes us to 50 or 60%, you know, having to be, you know, setting aside all the things that require in-person physical labor and et cetera. I think what will happen is we'll push to that limit for a bit during this pandemic. And then afterwards, we'll ricochet back. But we'll ricochet back further, right? So maybe we'll end up at 25%, 30% of the economy, right? So that's my big kind of like, if I was trying to be a smart venture capitalist right now, area that I think is a reality, is this will catalyze some of what was already inevitably going to happen, but in a way that nobody had anticipated.
Really interesting. I've got a couple growth investors on here. I was talking to Elliot Robinson from Bessemer and Jocelyn Kinsey from DFJ and a few others. You're a much earlier investor. And so let's just talk about, you know, from a seed, Series A kind of guy's perspective, how do you maintain relationships with founders right now? How do you continue to, you know, flip over rocks, kiss frogs, whatever you want to call it, still sort of actively source and look for things in an environment where you can't leave your house?
It's a great question. And I think it's different for every investor. I've long talked about how, you know, that one of the best parts about being an investor is that you get to play to your own strengths, right? So for me, as like an extrovert, as a really social person, as someone who likes to kind of be busy and doing things, my life normally is, you know, tons of calls and meetings all day, event or a dinner at night, you know, constantly at event, things like that. So I've always joked that I'm envious of my friends who are more like thesis driven, where they'll just like sit behind their computer, read for the whole day, and then be like, here are the 3 things that I want to do, right? Like those people are crushing this market. So, but for me, I think 2 things. First is that truthfully, I don't think I've had enough time yet to be fully strategic about, okay, how do I adjust my sourcing mechanisms? Because I think the priority was, you know, touch base with portfolio companies who want to touch base in this time. And then secondarily is kind of finish the deals that was already actively working on and get them through the finish line. So that was kind of the timeline. Now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, how do I be proactive, right? And for me, I've often found a lot of my best investments in companies have come from other investors and just folks that I know from the community and entrepreneurs that, you know, maybe are a little bit more kind of deal oriented or a little bit more kind of in the venture landscape. And so I think, there's a world where a lot of those like one-on-one coffee meetings just become like quick check-ins via Zoom or phone calls and that type of stuff. I think the thing that is going to be most interesting is the spontaneity and the random happenstance sourcing kind of will go away for a little while. I was at an event in early January, and just started chat. It was interesting. It was an event like outside of my typical, you know, industry. I started chatting to the guy next to me for a little while, and turns out he advises a company that I had a meeting with, or a call with, I should say, earlier this week. And there's a real chance I invest in that business. And I literally just met that guy because I didn't know anybody in the room, and he and I were standing by each other. And like, that stuff doesn't happen every day, but it actually, there's serendipity in sourcing, and the serendipity part goes away. So I think that's a real question. But I think people adjust, right? I think that it becomes more proactive with, reaching out to people virtually, staying top of mind. I think a lot of people will be, if you're, people who like to write or publish content, whatever, this will be really, a good time to start thinking about things like that. So I think it will change. I think it will shrink a little bit, but I think the rest will just change.
Yeah, interesting. Really appreciate you being here. I'm gonna give you sort of last word. Let's look sort of 6 months out. What does the world look like? Let's just get the sort of Arteen forecast on kind of where we are. Where do you think COVID-19 kind of leaves us in 6 months from now?
It's a good question. Man, it's tough, right? It's a really interesting. It's tough to answer this question without getting political, to be totally honest, just because these are the moments where governments actually are probably the most important thing in our civilization. And so I think it's hard. If you'd asked this question a week ago, I think a lot of people would answer much differently than if you asked today. So my take on this is I'm probably somewhere in the middle rung, where I don't think we're going to reach the case where there are 3 or 4 million Americans that have this, and kind of hundreds of thousands of deaths. Like I trust, and I have to, honestly, and I'm like an optimist at heart. Like I believe that there is enough data and enough practices now showing that there is a way to prevent that happening, and with the data showing that you can prevent this, and with people starting to take this seriously enough, which it has started to happen, I don't think we'll hit the worst case scenario, and I really hope I'm right about that. Proven that we are not going to be the best case scenario. We just don't have enough tests. We didn't move quickly enough on those, and so I think we're somewhere in the middle.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere in the middle. But I think the sad truth is that we're gonna right now we're still in pontification mode. A lot of people are just talking about
we're gonna go through it.
Yeah, we're going to go through it. And I think we're still in the phase where people can think and talk through it, and analyze it. But we're going to hit the phase really soon, which is going to be really sad, which is that people are going to start losing loved ones. And that's what I worry about. And people have already started to, I should be clear, but it's, I don't think we've let the reality sink in yet of the fact that we're about to lose a lot of human life. And the rest of us just got to do what we can to prevent that getting worse.
Look, this platform's called, the road untraveled. That's kind of the whole idea of this is you're a venture investor second, you're a human first. So really appreciate you jumping on here, sharing your insights. Arteen Arabshahi, VP at WndrCo. Thanks so much, brother. Good to see you.
Yo, thanks for making time, and thanks for having me.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.